Hey guys, good day. It's Thursday, time for our Noonish Bible Study. We're in the black and gold today. The Golden Eagles play tonight, first Division I football game of this season. I have no idea how they'll do. Hadn't really kept up with it much, but I'm glad they get to play. Hope they have a good time. Hope we win. All right, today we're in Genesis chapter 6, and we're kind of starting to look at the story of Noah. Now, I'm just going to kind of focus on the first part, the reason why the ark was built and what those things that happened. So, in chapter 6, it's in verse 9. It says this: "These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God, and Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth." So there's little summary statement about who Noah is and about his sons. And remember, I told you the prophecy or the prophetic word that was spoken about Noah when he was born, and the genealogy said this back in chapter 5, said, "When Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son and called his name Noah, saying, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief, rest from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. And Lamech lived after he fathered Noah 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Lamech were 777, and he died. And after Noah was 500 years old, he had Shem, Ham, and Japheth." So then we see, so with kind of this we were already introduced to Noah. There's a reference, a prophetic word about him, and then that's kind of a foreshadowing of now what's to come, the unveiling of the narrative of what happens with Noah. So verse 11 of chapter 6, "And now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood and make room in the ark." I'll kind of stop right there. So what we find is that man was filled with sin, mankind. And so there's a general reference here to all people, really, with the exception with Noah and his family, that the earth had really just turned on itself. And it said earlier in the scriptures that earlier in chapter 6 said, "The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention," everybody say intention, "of the thoughts, every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continuously." All right, and so we know the truth of this. We know that when we consistently meditate on that which is sinful and evil, what it produces in us is that which is sinful and evil. So let's go back to Cain. Remember Cain? Remember what the Lord said to Cain? He said, if you don't deal with the sin that's at your heart's door, then it will rule over you. It will master you. And sure enough, Cain didn't deal with the jealousy and maybe the anger that he had toward God. He didn't deal with it. So what did it do? It dealt with him. It reminds me of a saying from an old pastor theologian. He said that if you aren't killing sin, then sin will be killing you. If you don't kill the sin that's in you, then that sin is going to be killing you. It will master over you. So that's the description here about what was going on in the earth. And by this time, hundreds of years after Cain and Abel, we don't know how many people there are. I mean, that's not necessarily the Bible's aim, not trying to tell us how many people there are, but there's enough people where there is contempt in the land. There's anger, there is that the land is rife with violence, okay? And so there's a connection here that the evil that was continuously on their minds and their hearts has now overspilled into violence. And that's what happens to us, doesn't it? Remember what Jesus tells us, that they just started out mowing out by my window. I don't know if you can hear that, but I'll try to talk loud. Remember what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5. He says, "You have heard that it was said to our ancestors, do not murder. and whoever murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, everyone who is angry with his brother. And so Jesus backs us up in the process of how sin works. And he goes to the root of violence, of murder, which is anger in our hearts. And he goes back to Noah. What was at the root? Well, we see earlier in chapter 6, evil was continuously on the thoughts and the hearts of men. And then later on in chapter 6, what that was leading to was that the land was filled with violence. Because that's what that's what evil men do. We get to a place where sin controls us, and it begins to express itself in words, in our hands and our feet. We do things with it. So if we're angry, we hit, we shove, we hurt, we kill, right? We yell, we curse. That's what we do. If we're jealous, if if we want revenge, if we're greedy, all those things ultimately lead us to very violent acts of sin. And so that's what was happening in the earth. Now, so why is God going to destroy it? Why the judgment? Let's go back to creation. Is that why he created us? That evil thoughts that produce evil acts are contrary to God's design of creation. What is God's design of creation? Is to, first of all, be like him. What did he do? He created and he produced. So he created and he produced, which generated rest. Right? So that was his purpose in creation. And so men had turned against God's design, and what it was producing was death and violence and hatred and anger. And God says, this is not why I made this place. I didn't make this for this. So it's interesting that Noah's name sounds like rest, one who comes and brings rest. Out of the ground comes relief. Out of the ground comes rest. So what is Noah? He's a restoration of God's plan and design for men. His salvation. For God is our rest, and so Noah is his man to bring back men, the earth, to what it was made for. And you'll see this throughout the Old Testament, and all of it is a foreshadowing of the one and only Jesus, who is the Sabbath. He is the rest. Jesus is the salvation. He is the ark that saves us, that covers us, that delivers us, that rescues us. So when we look at Noah, I do think that there is a practical application for us personally. I don't want to miss that God's looking for good, righteous men who want to be used as vessels of God and His Spirit, and that by doing so, we create and redeem an atmosphere of a people. Like we're salt. That's why Jesus said, you're salt and light. That when you let God use you as a vessel for His salvation, for His purpose, for His redemption, it rescues people, it saves people, it delivers people, it brings salvation. And that He wants to do that that's essentially that. I mean, that is what the church is supposed to be. That the church is the ark, the vessel, right, of the people of God, saying, come in, be rescued, be saved, find relief, find rest. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and you will find rest. This is the place of rest. And ultimately, we have that ark, we have that place because of Jesus. And so, again and again, we see God's redemptive heart is to use His people to provide redemption and salvation for others. And He's not done doing that. It seems like that's the arc of His story. That's where it started. When man sinned, He wanted to save us, bring us back. With Noah, you'll see it with Moses, with Abraham, with Moses, the prophets, and then the pinnacle of the ark is Jesus Christ. So I want to leave you with that today. I pray that you will, and hope that you will be like Noah, a righteous man, ready to be used as a vessel. That even though you live maybe in an angry and violent land, that He can use you to change the atmosphere, create a new earth, a new heaven on earth. He wants to use you, his people, his church. All right. May the Lord bless you. We'll see you next time.